honestly, I believe that inside of your emergency fund, you should have a little bit of a buffer to help pay for maybe a subscription that's going to like give you a lot of value. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. Hi, my name is Brooke, and on this channel, we like to talk about all things personal finances and how we can get better with our money. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please make sure to subscribe and get notified every time I put out a new video. This is my second video in my April financial literacy series for beginners. And so today we are going to talk about emergency funds. So right now there's a lot going on with the stock market, going up and down. Everybody's unsure of what's going on with the economy right now because of all of the different things that are going into place politically and things like that. So one of the things that I've been hearing from a lot of the financial people online is that maybe this is time to move a little bit of our money into more conservative assets like cash rather than having it all in the stock market, especially if you might be in an industry where you could lose your job potentially or something like that. But just because there is fears of a potential recession happening, we're not in one yet, but we know that that is something that could happen. And when you're in those times, you want to have your cash on hand more so than anything that can go up and down and fluctuate like the market. So with that being said, when it comes to your emergency fund, you want to think about what actually needs to go into it. A lot of people online will say that the rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And so that is a pretty good rule to follow. However, what goes into those 3 to 6 months of living expenses? Does that include only the bare necessities, paying for a roof over your head, paying for maybe something like your internet bill, things like that? Or is it maybe a little bit more of making sure you have fun money and all that kind of stuff? So let's actually talk about what could go into an emergency fund and look at the numbers and play around with it and try and see what we think would be a good amount of money to have in an emergency fund to weather the storms of what's going on economically right now. So I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet and we're going to go through this. And this is just a little bit of an exercise for you all to start thinking about what you might want to include in your emergency funds and things like that. And this also is very dependent on your lifestyle and if you have any dependents, anything like that. So, this is just a good baseline for you to think about so that you can go from there. But let's move over to my spreadsheet now. So the first thing that we'll need to do is categorize each item. So let's add an item category and then the amount. So the first one obviously is going to be your rent or mortgage. And this is going to be so that you can have a roof over your head. So let's say for easy math that your rent or mortgage is $2,000 a month. And then we're just going to go ahead and make that a dollar amount. Now the next thing that you'll need to do is pay for any utilities. So utilities in my mind would include paying for water, electric, gas, internet, that kind of stuff for your house. If you have like a Simply Safe or like a security system, anything like that. So let's say that your utilities are going to be $450 a month. And this is going to be, all of those together. Next, let's talk about groceries. So if we are in an economic downturn, I think that it's probably prudent of us to maybe spend a little bit less eating out and making sure that we are buying stuff from the grocery store. So this will obviously be a different number based on how many people you have in your household, if you're single, if you're married, if you have kids. So take this number, maybe take the last 3 months of spending that you've been doing at the grocery store and divide that by 3 to kind of see like an average over 3 months and go from there. So for this one, let's do $500. And then next thing that we'll need to do is car. So any transportation that you need to do. So it's just a reality that if you live in most parts of the United States, you are going to need a car to get by. So make sure that in your emergency fund, you include getting gas because you're still going to need to get gas on a regular basis for your car, whether that's to go to your job or if you lose your job to look for new jobs, those kinds of things. So just, again, base this off of how much you're spending normally, and we'll put that in there. Also, keep in mind that you should also probably factor in your car insurance into this, because you will need to pay for your car insurance in order to keep your car. So you want to make sure that you put that into your budget as well. So let's say that for gas, registration, car, all that kind of stuff, we do $200 a month. This will not include if you have a car payment. That will go later into our debt section, which is what we are going to tackle next. So debt section, when you're thinking about your emergency fund and you're thinking about how much you owe to debt, this will only be the minimums. You're not going to be putting extra money to your debt if we're in this time period of you needing to live off your emergency fund, because you need the money to stretch as much as possible. You don't want to default on any of your loans, but you want to make sure that you can pay the minimum payments. So anything like if you have credit card debt, if you have car loan, if you have student loans, any of that stuff, we want to make sure that you're in a position where you can still pay your minimums so you don't default on your loans. So let's say that between car debt, student loans, that you have payments of $500. So that's pretty low. I know a lot of people have more than that, but go off of what your minimums are. But we're really just trying to survive when we're thinking about our emergency fund. And so really that's kind of all the stuff that you would probably want to think about with like the bare necessities. However, this is going to be a time that is not easy to get through, especially if you lose your job or if you're out of work for a period of time for reasons. And so honestly, I believe that inside of your emergency fund, you should have a little bit of a buffer to help pay for maybe a subscription. I'm not saying like go out and have like a bunch of subscriptions, but maybe just pick one subscription that you really enjoy and you know that that's going to like give you a lot of value, and pay for that. So for example, like if you really like books, maybe you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, or if you have a Libro FM subscription for audiobooks, those kinds of things, because this is going to be a time where it's going to be, you need something to cope, and it's important to have things that will help you to decompress and really feel better in those moments. So I don't want you to have such a bare bones thing that you can't have any kind of fun that's not free fun, because it's going to be a little bit difficult to continue that. So for me, even if you're living off of your emergency fund, you still want to make sure that you have a little bit of buffer for fun. Now, when it comes to anything else, when it comes to paying for clothes or going out to eat or things like that, that's a little bit more different, and that's in a more gray area for me. And so really, I would say that if there is a time in which you are just living off of your emergency fund until you can find another source of income or anything like that, that should probably be something that you just hold off on. I know it's not easy to do that. It's definitely takes a lot of restraint, but it's just something that if you're trying to live off of the bare minimum, like that's just something that you're going to have to know, hey, this is going to be something that I'm doing for this time period until I can get to the next month or the next moment. So I would leave it out. But if you feel like you really need that, maybe you could do like a personal spending category of like $25, $50, something like that. But I would keep it very minimum, because this is really just about basic survival, and so you probably want to cut down on those things anyway. So I'm just going to add in a personal spending buffer here, and we'll do $25 as well, just so that maybe that's like eating out maybe once, going to fast food. So, because fast food is getting so expensive now too, but just like something like that, so you don't feel so deprived, but you also recognize that this is not the time to be splurging. So now we're going to take all this and we're just going to use the sum function to go ahead and sum all of this up. So what this is going to bring us to is $3,700. And so now what you're going to do is we're going to write out the period of time that we want this money to last, and this is going to be in months. Like I said, 3 to 6 months is what is usually said, and sometimes, in this time period, maybe even 9 to 12 months is better. So if you know that you're in a volatile industry and you know that there's been rumors about layoffs and things like that, maybe you want to err on getting more in your saving in your emergency fund, but if you feel like you're in a pretty stable position, you should be okay with a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, but it's just really up to your comfort level and how you feel right now. So now we're going to look at how much that's going to be. So all we're going to do is we are going to multiply some numbers together. So we're going to take this 3,700 and we are going to multiply it by this number here. And then a cool trick that you can actually do in Google Sheets is if you add the $ to these numbers here, that is going to make it an absolute variable, so it's not going to change. And then what you can do is you can actually just drag down this so that it will fill it out. It'll go off that same number, 3,700, but then it will choose the next cell in here. So it will go down and continue to multiply it by the different periods. So looking at this, a 3-month emergency fund is going to be around $1,100. Now that seems like a very high number. And if you're just starting out, it's definitely really hard to think about how can I save even that much money. So this is when we go back to what can we cut? Maybe we take out the personal spending and we put it to 0. And we also think about maybe just having one subscription for $10. Things like that. That can bring that down. It doesn't do a significant buffer because really your biggest items here are your rent, your utilities, your car, stuff like all that. That is going to be a way that you can cut down even more. But those aren't always the easiest to cut down on, especially your rent or mortgage. You can't just like uproot your life and move because you'll have to, pay for moving costs and things like that. So you have to think about that. But if there's any way that you can like bring this down to a slim budget as possible, that's best. And so when you're starting out, you're looking at these emergency funds, I really want you to think about like how long you would like to try and save this money up for. So if you want to try and save up the money within 12 months, maybe you're already at a starter emergency fund of $1,000, like in the Dave Ramsey baby step. You take that $11,000, you would subtract the $1,000 that you already have saved, and then you say, hey, I want to save up this money within 12 months. Then what you would do is you would take that money that you would need, about $10,000, and divide that by 12. And that would tell you how much money you need to set aside each month. If you had like $10,000 that you're trying to save up in 12 months, that's going to be around $833 a month, which is a lot for people right now. And so if that feels untenable, like think about what you can do. But what you should always be doing is when you're in a period where your job is stable, where you know that your paycheck is coming in, you're not worried about layoffs, that kind of stuff, you need to be saving every month just automatically so that you can get into the habit of it. You don't even think about it. And when you're in this uncertain time period, you're able to weather the storm and you're not starting from 0. Because right now, starting from 0 is going to be a lot harder than even if you started from $1,000. Those are some things to keep in mind. But I really hope that this video was helpful to you all to kind of break down what do we actually mean by what living expenses should go inside of our emergency fund, thinking through like how much money we actually need to be saving up to get to those milestones of 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and being honest with ourselves that this is going to be something that takes a while. But if we set ourselves up for success today, the great thing about once your emergency fund is fully funded, you don't have to keep funding it. Then you can start moving your money into other savings goals or other sinking funds that you have. And that's really exciting. But the thing that I don't want you all to be worrying about right now is not having enough cash on hand to weather an economic downturn that could potentially put you out of work or anything like that, because we never know how long these are going to last. We always hope that the market will recover quickly. We always hope that things are going to get better sooner rather than later, but we don't know that. And so for me, I always like to be cautious but optimistic. And so when I'm planning, I like to err on the side of caution. I like to have my emergency fund be a little bit bigger because that helps me to sleep better at night. So I hope this video was helpful to you. Let me know down in the comments below, how many months do you have saved up in your emergency fund? Are you looking to shore up your emergency fund now as the markets are a little bit more volatile right now and we're unsure of what's going on? So let me know all of those thoughts in the comments below. I hope this video was helpful. As always, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in another video. Bye y'all!